Hi, this is Ryan Uprizeze from QSend Technologies, here for QAlert Insider. The theme of today's episode is waste management. We're going to talk to a few people who have some experience in waste management and using QAlert for waste management. And we're going to talk about how QAlert can benefit you in your waste management operation. We have Sarah Wiesel with us today. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hello, Ryan. Good. Thank you.
Good. And Sarah, you come to us from where?
I am with Plymouth Township. I am the solid waste coordinator. I've been doing that about 4 years now. Prior to that, I've been with the township for 8 years, but in this position, working with the solid waste department for about 4 years.
Oh. We also have with us John Mikrona. Hi, John. How are you this morning?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for inviting me.
And John, where are you joining us from?
I'm Deputy Administrator for the City of Southfield.
And how long have you been Deputy Administrator?
I am in my 6th year with the City of Southfield.
Okay. Excellent. And we also have Jim Hartley. He's a coworker of mine. How are you, Jim?
I'm fine, Ryan. Thank you.
Jim is a sales representative here at QSend Technologies, but prior to that, Jim has a history in waste management. Jim, how long have you been with us?
I've been with QSend and government branch for about a year now. Prior to that, I worked for a private waste hauler where I got to know Sarah. And prior to that, I was a city administrator for the city of Warren, Michigan's 3rd largest city, and a neighboring community of the community that John Mikrona worked in. We were acquaintances and hadn't really been in communication in several years. And we worked together during the fiscal crisis back in 2008 and 2009. So we got very well acquainted with each other and each other's needs then. And many years later, we reconnected on some issues that John was having at the time in the city. And again, when I was bringing QAlert to the waste hauling industry, which both Sarah and John share, the need was in customer service and the ability for the local community to be able to connect and have a seamless integration of communication in the solid waste space.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so let's get to those connections. You all have some things in common. So you've all had, in some way or another, experience with waste management. And you've all used QAlert or are currently using it, but you all have had a different experience that gives each of you a unique perspective. So let's start with you, Sarah.
Okay.
What was your workflow in solid waste department like prior to QAlert? And then when did you become customers and how did that workflow change?
Well, prior to QAlert, the communication between this department, it was prior to my tenure, but with this department and our residential hauler would have been via phone or via email. So if a resident called and said, hey, they missed my trash, they didn't pick it up, it would at that point be us sending an email to the route supervisor and saying, hey, this address needs to be, taken care of. Somehow the trash was missed, that sort of thing, alerting them to the issue.
Did that work well? I mean, did they respond to the emails in a timely way?
Well, I would say that was probably the biggest hurdle was the follow-up to situations like that. So, you're having to go back and follow up with them if they didn't respond back, just to make sure they'd been taken care of, or you have to call the resident to confirm that it's been taken care of. So it was kind of tedious, the follow-up that was required when we were utilizing email.
Right, and I'm sure you have like a really long list of emails, right? And they just kind of start getting buried if they keep coming in and people lose track.
Of course, yep, definitely. So so that QAlert allows me, when a resident calls, I literally just put in the service request and it goes directly to the hauler, and they get notified, and then as soon as they have completed the task and completed the service request, they close it out. Or they leave me notes. They can leave me notes. They can tell me, hey, nothing curbside, or this is an item we don't pick up. It's wonderful.
And you have it, and that the citizen got that information and they've been taken care of, and that they got all that communication as it happened.
Sarah, in addition to the negative requests and complaints that she gets through the system, she also has to handle new residents or residents who need cart deployments. And that aspect of service being delivered quickly and timely and accountably also relates to cart deployment. And can you talk about that?
It really works just as seamlessly as a complaint or a missed pickup. So we have different options within QAlert, and one of them is recycle cart. And I just click it in there and I input the customer information and let them know that a new cart needs to be delivered or a repair needs to be made, wheel repair, that sort of thing, lids getting cracked. And I just put in what the issue is, and it routes to the deployment department, and they take it, and when they come out to the township, they do the delivery or the repair, and then they close it out and let me know. They say, cart repaired, cart delivered.
Gotcha. And I'm sure that they have a list and they know whatever addresses they need to stop at. They have the carts or the new wheels or whatever else that they need already loaded up in the truck.
Yeah, so it's a separate crew. It's a separate crew that comes out to deliver carts and make repairs. It's not the
Gotcha. Wouldn't be the
collection crew.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
I think we just touched on one of the real benefits of QAlert, and I want to make sure we all caught it. The statement was something like, I don't know which department handles something at GFL. And that's right. I don't know who handles what, and I don't have to know who handles what, because QAlert knows where things go. Same thing with my residents. They don't have to know that the building department handles this or that code enforcement handles that. They just identify the problem, and then we've determined internally who's going to deal with that problem. And I think that was a big problem before with just phone calls, because people would sort of guess, well, if there's a problem with this city building, so I'm going to call the building department. Well, no, it's not the building department, it's facility maintenance. So that's a huge plus with QAlert, is that the expertise is not needed because the expertise is built into the program.
Okay, John, your experience is probably different and broader as far as how QAlert has affected the way that things are done.
Absolutely.
Could you just tell us about that?
We are pushing QAlert, which we have branded Southfield Solutions. It's on our main webpage. It's in our newsletters. It's being pushed to our residents. We're pushing it with our employees to report building issues right now. That's our big push to get that in place, so that now we're getting the photos, we're getting the geolocation of problems, because we have a large campus. And sometimes people say there's this problem here, and if they don't describe it well enough, we can't find it. But when they've taken a picture, when we see from their phone exactly where they're at, we love it. In relation to solid waste, our implementation is quite a bit different too. We thought we had taken this as far as we could before QAlert. We had email lists, and everyone got a copy of the list, of every email that was sent. It was as automated as we could, and it was still a big pain in the neck. We were spending a lot of time playing middleman between our waste hauler and our resident, and it also kind of painted us in a poor picture because it highlighted that we were really just customers of our waste hauler. And we like to be thought of as service providers more, whether it's through a contractor or through our own employees. So through Southfield Solutions, through QAlert, we are doing that. Even if we enter in a resident's complaint or concern, we list them as the person who receives the response, and we encourage that resident to install the app and start making these responses. I love it. Residents complain and report a concern, request a recycle bin, and it is right to our hauler. It is handled, and we're not doing anything. And we were almost taking up a whole person's time just standing in the middle, catching complaints and forwarding them and making sure they were handled. And it was a lot of time for a city our size. So I I love QAlert. It automates what we couldn't do any better than QAlert, and it does it without any effort on our part.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest advantages of using QAlert is the fact that the system automatically contacts citizens back for you through text, email, or a voice call, or however they want to be contacted. And you're able to keep them in the loop automatically. Just think of how labor saving that is. As you said, it was almost a whole person's time in your case. So that's either a huge amount of time and labor saving, or, if you're a city that just never did have the resources, didn't have anybody really following up with citizens, this enables you to do that. So for a smaller municipality like that, this enables them to provide just a much higher level of citizen service than they ever would have been able to. John, you had another, and you don't just use QAlert for solid waste, you use it for everything in Southfield, correct?
We use it for everything. One thing I'd like to mention, though, with QAlert, it's not just automation, it's accountability. We have a lot of instances where someone would call one of our internal departments and say, hey, I need this and this. And the other person says, okay, I'll get to it. And then it never happens. And pretty soon everyone's forgotten it until the incident comes up that should have been handled and it wasn't. The great thing with QAlert is the request goes in, the person who gets it, even if they forget about it right off the bat, it's going to be there the next time they log in. They're going to see that. So things do not drop through the cracks, and we used to be really good at that. So now QAlert is catching things, and it's helping us be a better us. In answer to your question, yes, we had another solution in place. I came into this customer service or customer relationship management because we had purchased another application, and after 2 years, we had not put it into place or into service, although we were paying for it. So I put it into place without any question, without any thought. I had to be done. It couldn't go on like this. So I did it, and no sooner did I get this done than I went, oh, this is not a good solution. So it was really disheartening. I was walking around kind of in the dumps trying to think of what am I going to do when I ran into Jim Hartley, and he's not really a salesperson, he's a solution provider for me. And I told him my woe, and he's like, hey, I got your solution. Got you right now. And he was totally right. Our previous program was a combination citizen resident complaint system, social networking system. And those are the two worst things to combine into one process. It's horrible because somebody is always going to look bad, whether fairly or unfairly. Initially, a lot of times it's the city government. But then once we respond, then sometimes, and not just a couple times, it's the resident who ends up looking bad, but we lose either way. I don't want my employees to look bad. I don't want my residents to look bad. And when it comes to reporting complaints or issues or things of that nature, there really is no looking good. And the person who really needs to hear about it is the resident and the city. And that's what QAlert does. It brings us together. In the other process, somebody would write a concern or complaint and it would be outlandish. But when you searched our city, all you saw at first was just that complaint. You never saw it. You had to go into it to see our responses to say, well, that's not really true. So this is a much better and healthier way to address things. Before, we used to have people who would grandstand. The same people who want to go to council meetings to be heard, they would jump on this other solution to be heard. Now, the people who go on QAlert are the people who have legitimate concerns, and we work with them to address the concerns. And that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Well, good. We're glad it's working out. But yeah, back to the other solution you were just talking about, mixing the social media with complaints I can't think of a worse combination. But I'm glad that you're happy now with QAlert. We have our philosophy is completely opposite of that. We think that if somebody has a complaint or some type of service that they like, that's something that should be handled between the citizen and the municipality privately. and we filter it down to just the legitimate complaints, as you said, rather than people just sort of grandstanding. So Jim, you have, I think, an interesting perspective because you worked in waste management and your company became a customer and started using QAlert. You saw a lot of benefits to your company directly, and then you liked it so much you came and worked for us. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience, starting with when you worked in solid waste for GFL?
Sure. GFL is headquartered in Southfield and has a footprint in Southeast Michigan that they've probably got the largest footprint in Southeast Michigan, servicing at least over 1 million households a week. 65 plus communities throughout the region, last I checked, and growing. The reason that QAlert was brought into the waste space was because it is a municipal CRM. So it made logical sense that a municipal waste hauler handling residential operations would use the very same system that its municipal customer uses. 2014 was when we began using it in the residential waste space. And at the time we had 20 communities and we grew to have over 65 communities in about 3.5 years. And QAlert was what allowed the residential growth to happen and allowed the company to absorb new customers, which both Southfield and Plymouth Township became customers during that time. So in the case of a city like Southfield or a township like Plymouth, you have a large operation of government employees that need that very accountability that John mentioned. And QAlert became part of that integration, certainly from the beginning in Plymouth Township, as a customer relationship management tool directly with the township, as Sarah has explained.
What was your workflow like at GFL before, and how did that change after you started using QAlert?
Well, the waste industry relies on software that is very powerful, and it handles mostly commercial and industrial applications. In other words, billing, frequency, dumpsters and things like that. And it really doesn't cater to the residential workspace. So we didn't have a way of tracking customer service complaints, and we certainly didn't have a way for the customers themselves to track their complaints. So QAlert was brought in to manage all residential services. The call center uses it just like a 311 call center would use it in a municipality, and it allows customer service, no matter how it's received, to evenly flow the service requests to the field using GIS technology that not only gets it to the right community, but it actually gets to the right supervisor who's responsible for handling services in that particular area. So it was quite a daunting task to figure out, okay, I've received a request in Southfield. Who is the supervisor that handles Southfield, and what areas of Southfield or what communities do they serve? Well, QAlert does that in the background. So customer service just has to input it, or if it comes in through the mobile app or the web form, it automatically gets routed to the supervisor who handles it. And in the waste space, the supervisor is responsible. The field route supervisor is the person who deals with what happens next. Am I going to send a truck back to pick up a missed pickup, or am I going to drive over in my own pickup and throw the missed pickup into the back of my pickup? Now, Sarah and John both know that the supervisor is the one who reports back to them. And it's their accountability that allows QAlert to track what I call the what happens next. It's one thing to receive a request, it's another thing to respond to it. And most importantly, for everyone who's a stakeholder to know what's going on. And that could be the resident, it could be the solid waste director like Sarah, it could be the city administrator like John. It could also be on the waste hauler's end, it could be the supervisor who has to respond to it. It could be the management team that oversees all of field operations. It could also be the customer service representative who then answers the next phone call that has to be able to know what's going on. As John mentioned, you can actually tell what happened later on when you need to know. It's all about that accountability. So the hauler is able to participate and play in the same sandbox as the municipality, and so can the resident who is ultimately the customer. And that's why it was a perfect fit.
And you talked about for a company like GFL that has, I think you said 60 or so municipalities that they service, that figuring out who handles what, and within each municipality you have multiple route supervisors, and if somebody has a missed pickup at this address, who does that need to go to? Who's the person who handles that? And when you're servicing 60 municipalities, that's a daunting task to be able to figure that out. So QAlert can do all of that automatically using geographic data, right?
That's where that accountability comes in, is that because it all goes into the system, the municipality is able to know what's going on from what happens in the field, and it's all in real time. And, if I could address Sarah, for instance, Sarah, our statistics show that they receive around 500 service requests a year. They're pushing upwards of 4,500 service requests. Those are all service requests that either didn't have to come into the call center in the municipality, or they're 4,500 phone calls that Sarah didn't have to make to the supervisor to verbally address, or they're emails that I believe that's how it would have worked in the past, is that Sarah would have sent an email. So maybe Sarah could talk a little more about how that workflow has made it so she doesn't have to touch all the things as much, and she can just go back and see what happened.
Well, and that's exactly it. It's much more efficient. So, once the service request is in, I guess I talk to the route supervisor pretty much on a daily basis just to touch base. But everything just gets handled pretty much behind the scenes. So, it's excellent. The other best thing is the reporting aspect and the tracking aspect of being able to track issues and, determining why does this particular address get missed? Is it because of the location of the address, or is it because the resident is putting it out late? And those things are much easier to track and identify with QAlert.
Yeah, well, let's get into the reporting. I'm glad you brought that up. What sort of things have you found, or what do you use it for mostly?
Well, I use it mostly. My favorite thing is to be able to search by address. So when you get a phone call from a resident that indicates that, usually their first thing is, well, this happens all the time. They miss me all the time. So with QAlert, I can easily go in because, everything is tracked. So every time they call me about a missed pickup, it's tracked in the system. And, I can easily look and see, okay, yeah, this is your second call. You know what I mean? It's only the second time that they've ever missed you. But yeah, it just makes it easier for us to try to identify what the issue is. Why is that house getting missed? Is it because it's the only house on one particular block that the truck has to back down? And we have a lot of those little fancy streets in Plymouth Township where the truck has to back down all the way. So things like that. But it's much easier for us to track it that way of what the issue is.
So wait, will the drivers just skip those streets if they can get away with it, or what? What's that about?
Well, I mean, it's never an intentional, skip. But I mean, it's quite interesting. If you don't work in this field of solid waste, I mean, before I took this position, you really, as just an average citizen, you really don't realize what those haulers go through on a day-by-day basis.
Because I don't work in solid waste, and I totally just take trash pickup for granted as long as I get the bins out, and then the trash just kind of goes away.
And that's how they want it to be. I mean, that's how, the hauler wants it to be. They want it to be, they have a name for it, something about an invisible service. But I mean, they go through a lot of challenges throughout the day. There's truck issues. There's people who call in, so then you have haulers from other communities that are coming to help out, and they don't know your neighborhood. So they don't know a street that looks like it's a driveway, but it's really a street. You know what I mean? So those are the situations where it gets a little dicey out there. But QAlert allows us to kind of track all of that and just identify what the main issue is.
That's a really good point, and a really good advantage of using QAlert is just the amount of data that you're collecting. And I really love that it's collecting data and being able to run reports and analyze the data to improve your performance is not a separate endeavor from the day-to-day work itself, right?
Correct.
Yeah, you use the product in your workflow, and it helps you get things done. And as it helps you get things done, you're collecting all of that data. So there's no separate effort needed.
Oh, yeah. And you can get graphs, you can have it collected for you in any format that you want.
John, do you use the reporting much?
I use the reporting, and it helps me identify problems. And sometimes the problem's not us, I have to admit. I'll have a resident call to complain about something. I take a look at that resident, and I find that they seem to have a problem with every aspect of the service they receive. So it helps put things in perspective.
Definitely, I agree.
There's 99.99% of our residents are wonderful, but every once in a while, there's someone who just seems to always have a problem with whatever happens.
Let's not forget that both John and Sarah have people they have to report to about performance of how the city is functioning, how the township is functioning, how the solid waste department is functioning. And they have to provide the reports to elected officials and people who want to know themselves what's going on. And those very same, I call them frequent flyers, the people who constantly have a problem, they're the ones that go to the council meeting or the board meeting. And sometimes the elected officials have to listen to complaints that may or may not be valid. And maybe John and Sarah could talk about the experiences they've had with being able to go from the perceived situation to the reality by using the reporting functionality that they actually have.
Jim, you're absolutely right. We never try to embarrass anyone, but there certainly have been times when I've needed to let people know, well, here's the other side of that matter, and it helped put things in perspective. Another interesting thing about QAlert is, I don't know if anyone else notices this, but everyone who knows you thinks that calling you personally on your cell phone is the fastest way to get something done. And the part that makes me chuckle is that as soon as the person gets off my cell phone, I log into QAlert and I enter their request because I know that's the fastest way to get something done and to track it. So really, they think that they're getting this extra level of service because they're my neighbor or they're my friend or they work here or something. But really, I'm just funneling them to our best process. And that's what I really like about QAlert. But it does kind of crack me up that people always think that if, hey, I'll call my neighbor, he'll get this taken care of. And what am I going to do with it? I'm just going to put it in the same system, just like they could have.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So they're like, oh, I have John's personal cell phone number. I'll just call him right up, and then it's just going in with all the other ones anyway.
But it's not only does it just go in with all the other ones, but it gets done. That's the point. I'm not uncomfortable.
It's customer service. That's
yes. It's not just dumping something. It's putting it in the best way to get it done. And that way, if someone just talks to me, I might forget it. I might in 3 months I won't be able to look that up again. It'll be gone. But if I put it in QAlert, it gets processed. And if it ever comes up again, I can go back in and look at it and say, oh yeah, I remember that. Yep. And there again, they think I'm providing this wonderful customer service. No, I just have this wonderful database at my fingertips.
I agree.
So as the old saying goes, good fences make good neighbors. If I could put my municipal hauler hat on, I would say that having a communications tool that allows you, the city administrators, to know what the hauler is doing makes for a good contractual relationship, or an improved one as well, because just as it happens with you guys, the hauler very often gets accused of levels of service that are perceived to be maybe not up to par because of complaints that went unanswered. But with QAlert, since everyone knows exactly what's going on, I would imagine that relationship is made better because you have that accountability that John talked about earlier. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I don't have to have Post-its. I don't have to do anything. The system does it for me. And the nice thing is that everyone knows the system does it for them. So no one's going to let things slide because they know there's this record out there and it shows every time it's touched. It wasn't for a solid waste, but it was in another matter. I brought up the history on a complaint here on campus, and I was able to see who printed it and who looked at it and who followed up on it and who responded. And it's just wonderful. It's like having this assistant follow you around with a notepad and write down everything that you're doing, and then write down everything that everyone else is doing, so that if you ever need to go back and look at it, you've got the impartial record. It is, I don't want to sound negative, but it keeps us all honest. And I really like that. And it gives us fair warning. No one goes into QAlert thinking, well, no one's going to see what I do. Everybody knows that everything that we do will be seen. And that helps us all keep on our best game. And I think that's a real benefit.
Yeah,
I agree. And
please, Sarah.
I also just wanted to say, well, I mean, even from the hauler's perspective, I think, just with my chats with the supervisor, how nice it is for them too. I mean, it lets them not forget that something needs to be taken care of. It's their tracking as well. So I know it works really well for them, because sometimes I'll get a call and a resident will be concerned that their trash was missed because it's later in the day type of thing. And I don't want to necessarily put it into QAlert, because then it shows as a missed pickup or an issue for them. And the supervisor will be like, no, so that I remember, please put it into QAlert. You know what I mean? It's their way to track their performance. So yeah. I know they utilize it and like it.
You're saying you don't want to make the hauler look bad by having missed pickups that are, like, if it's the citizen's fault, really?
Well, yeah. So, you have certain residents that they get nervous. It's 3:00 and my trash hasn't been picked up yet. So they've missed my street, whereas sometimes it's night and I'm like, they're still out there. They're still working. They're still picking it up, but I want to just maybe because it is a street that will often sometimes get missed. It's one of those special streets or whatever. So we want to give them a kind of a heads up. So it's a reminder to the hauler as well. Don't miss this street.
I see. So nothing really happened at all.
Correct.
And if I could add something, Brian?
Yeah.
One thing that QAlert does not do is depersonalize the service at all. I really sort of wondered about that, but it just doesn't. It gives me time to provide a higher level of service at times, because I'm not spending so much time on that treadmill of following up on things. We had a resident complain about something that just was nothing the city would handle, just wouldn't. But I could tell on the phone she was an elderly resident, and because I saw it on QAlert and I called her, and when I talked to her, I could tell she was just so befuddled by this issue that I said, you know what, I'm going on to lunch right now. I'm going to stop by and take care of it. It wasn't a city thing. It was just a neighbor thing. But without QAlert, one, I probably would never have seen that. I was just doing my daily peruse of complaints. And two, I probably wouldn't have had time because I'd have been so busy on other things that I wouldn't have time to focus on something like that. So QAlert does not depersonalize service. What it does is it lets you personalize service when it's really needed. And I know to that resident that made a huge difference to her. And I know that I would not have had time to do that before QAlert.
You know what? I'll tell you what it was. She had a possum crawled into her garage and died. And I had to tell her that, you know, QAlert has a place for dead animals. It does. But those are dead animals on the road, not dead animals in your yard or in your garage. So I told her I would take care of it, and I kind of regretted it all the way over there. And I got there and I said, okay, how long has this thing been dead? And she goes, a long time. And I went, ugh. Oh. It had been dead so long that it had dried out. So it wasn't bad. It ended up being a good deed that didn't turn out badly for me. But as soon as she said, oh, it's been dead a long time, I thought, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? But, you know, that came up on QAlert. It came up as something that was not responded to. And I would have never even noticed that before because it would have went to our Department of Public Works and I'd have never seen it.
Oh, you're a saint.
You have time to do things. And because before I was just spending so much time just tracking things, and QAlert does all that tracking. So I feel it's almost freeing to me because I don't worry. I don't go home worrying if we're handling things, because before I go home, I take a look at my dashboard and I see what's up. So it's not intended to catch anything or anyone. It's really just intended to help us stay on the ball, and it really does a great job. So I'm really sold because of that feature in particular.
Yeah, and right, and the data collection and the tracking is not there to, you know, spy on people and make things unpleasant for everybody. It really just is, it helps you spot problems and solve them, right? And improve and just prevent the next problem from happening.
In my city, we have 20 customer relationship managers. And under our old program, they hated me. They really did. I got nasty emails and voicemails and things like that. I had people that didn't want to put their name on anything. They wanted to use pseudonyms. They didn't want to be stalked in the internet. And I got the group together. I brought in Jim. He gave a presentation, and I've never had a presentation where everyone went, okay, yes. But that's absolutely what everyone did. Not only did everyone at the presentation say that's what we want, but a lot of them contacted me afterwards to say, hey, that is really what we want. So I'm actually glad we went to the other solution first because it made going to QAlert so easy. People were so eager to jump on this application and put it to use that there was no selling involved. We just sort of offered it out there and people jumped on it. And we have people doing things with QAlert that are beyond what I was even anticipating. They're calling me up because they want some added this change, they want that change, they think this isn't clear enough. And that's wonderful because it's not just me trying to improve the system, it's every one of our customer relation managers is looking at the system and saying, how can we improve it?
Yeah, I'm always surprised as much as I think that I know our product and how people are using it, they still manage to come up with creative ways to use and apply things that I never would have thought of.
I just wanted to recap the part that you both have in common, which is the solid waste issues and how that has helped your relationship with the hauler. Maybe we could start with Sarah, if you could just tell us how that's ultimately enhanced your contractual relationship with GFL, and then maybe John could talk about the same.
Well, for me, I really think it's accountability. So it's kind of held the hauler accountable for It just helps us track and identify any issues that they're having. The relationship, it's wonderful just because they're able to handle everything seamlessly. I don't have to track them down and say, hey, I didn't get an email about this. Was this taken care of? Everything is just handled via the system and just makes everything much more efficient and organized. We didn't have GFL is really our largest hauler that the township has ever worked with. Based on the history that like I said, I came into this and GFL was already our hauler. But prior to that, we dealt with much smaller haulers, which don't exist anymore. So obviously having such a large company handling our services, any sort of database that you can utilize that's going to make everything easier and more efficient is welcome.
Yeah, so do you find that it's necessary with a bigger hauler just because it's more difficult to get somebody on the phone like you could with a really small hauler?
Well, I guess more or less that the smaller companies back in the day just didn't have access to a system like this, perhaps. Do you know what I mean? Being a smaller unit. So everything was more email, faxes, phone calls.
So would you say, Sarah, would you say that like looking forward, you have this technology that you use with the hauler, and ultimately when that contract comes up for renewal, would the fact that they are able to communicate using QAlert be a competitive edge for that hauler versus, say, they all come in at the same price, they all have a fleet of trucks, they all have everything else being equal? Having a tool where you can communicate seamlessly through a municipal platform, would you consider that to be a plus or a competitive edge?
I would definitely put that in the plus column. Yes. I think at this point, this is definitely a benefit. So it would be preferable. I, of course, am not at that level, but it's definitely something that I would want to have in there as a request to have this sort of interface. It makes my job much more efficient.
Yeah, now that you had experience with one hauler who has a tool like this, you really wouldn't never want to go.
You wouldn't want to give it up. Correct.
Ryan, I think that's a great point. When it comes time to contracts, everyone picks up garbage, everyone picks up recycling. Everyone has some cities who say they're wonderful. Everyone has some cities who say they're not so wonderful. And to some degree, it's difficult to screen them out. But for us, QAlert will not be a perk. It's going to be a requirement because we don't have time to make the phone calls. I don't even care if the other side has a bank of people taking phone calls. We don't have time to make the phone calls. We have other things to do. So we need QAlert. We need the accountability. We need the automation. For all the things we've discussed, we've already internally discussed this, and this is going to be something we're going to need from our next hauler because we can't go backwards with our customer service.
Yeah, definitely. Once you've experienced just how much more efficient and how much time it saves you to have a tool like this with all the automation, there's no way you can go back to having to manually make phone calls and all the labor and time involved in that.
What would the two of you say to someone who doesn't even realize that they could have this kind of technology to be able to talk seamlessly back and forth with their third-party residential hauler?
I can tell you, talk to us. Talk to my DPW staff. Talk to my mayor's office. Talk to anyone who handles these complaints and see what it was like before QAlert and see what it's like now. Talk to some of our residents. We had one where a resident even called me back and said, you know what, this is amazing. I just got off the phone and they're picking it up now. Now, it just so happened that, our waste hauler was in the area, but without QAlert, that still would not have been possible. So I just talk to someone who uses it.
All right. Well, John, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us and for all of the great things that you said about QAlert. We're so pleased that our product is helping you provide the best service that you possibly can. James, thank you. Good to hear from you as always. And have a great afternoon, everybody.
Hey, thanks a lot. I enjoyed
All right,
it.
thank you. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.